you have to manage your stress in order to get everything else in line. And when your sleep is disrupted, training takes a hit, your fueling takes a hit, results are slower, it screws up your hunger hormones. So it's just something that needs to be addressed. And at midlife, stress isn't just work, it's family, it's finances, it's teenagers, it's caregiving for adults. So there's a lot of stress that comes with midlife. And you always hear people say you can't out-train a bad diet. You can't out-train a nervous system that never turns off.
Welcome back to another episode of Midlife Unleashed. Today we're talking about longevity. And I think somewhere along the way, we've all been taught that health is about grinding harder, pushing more, and ignoring warning signs. And in your 20s and in your 30s, that might work. But in midlife, hustle becomes really the fastest way to break your body. So today we're talking about longevity over hustle, how to train, eat, recover, and how to think so that your body still works decades from now and not just for the next 30 days. So let's dive in. Hi, Doug. How are you today?
Good. How you doing?
Good. I'm excited to dive into this episode. I think we can all kind of relate to that hustle and grind mentality. So it's going to be interesting to learn about the effects of that on your body, especially in midlife.
Oh, yeah. And longevity is key. And so if that's what we're working and if that's what we want, then we might need to put some of that hustle to the side.
Absolutely. So thinking about hustle, and I think that's a word that's thrown around frequently in so many different scenarios, but along with hustle harder, grind harder, and all those sayings, no pain, no gain is another one that people hear. So, Doug, why does the no pain, no gain mindset stop working in midlife?
Yeah, well, effort is important. And there's no doubt that there needs to be some, but as we get closer to midlife, what becomes more important is recovery. So when you're 22, you could train like a maniac. You can eat some Pop-Tarts, sleep for 6 hours, and wake up feeling like some kind of superhero. But in your 40s and 50s, that just doesn't work. That will leave you with sore joints, jacked up hormones, poor sleep quality, and joints that seem to now have their own opinions. So what changes isn't necessarily the work ethic, it's the recovery capacity, right? And so training stress, as I learned a long time ago, is just half of the equation. And everyone thinks that they're like building muscle and doing all this stuff while they're in the gym, but it's just the opposite. That's when they're breaking it down. The other half occurs when you refuel, when you sleep, and when you kind of downgrade your nervous system. So that's why when we get to midlife, it changes, and what becomes more important is kind of like the programming and the progression and the recovery. Those are much more important than just going in with the no pain, no gain. People aren't necessarily lazy at midlife. They're kind of overworked and overwhelmed and kind of need to kind of focus less on adding more intensity and then just making sure that they're recovering properly so that the intensity isn't going to eventually slow them down in the long term.
Absolutely. And in midlife, I know that there's a lot of different ways that people tend to train or take care of themselves as opposed to how they did previously when they were a little bit younger. But what is the difference between training for fitness versus training for longevity?
Well, fitness training is about short term, right? That's the bigger, faster, stronger, leaner. That's when you're going for those PRs or those personal records or you're going for performance like now. Whereas longevity training is more about long-term capacity. right? We want our joints to feel good. We want to maintain our muscle. We want to keep our metabolism nice and steady. We want to focus on mobility, balance, and most importantly, maintaining our independence. So the question shifts from, you know, can I crush this workout to will this serve me 20 years from now? A simple way to think about it is, fitness is more about looking capable, whereas longevity is more about being capable. Right. And those are two different things, and longevity training, clearly the question that it answers is this going to benefit me 20 years from now? Whereas the fitness is all about right now, looking good, being able to better your best. And longevity's on the other side of that.
I have a question actually thinking about that. Is there
Sure.
any way that both coexist? So maybe for someone in their mid to late 30s or early 40s that's approaching midlife, but they're thinking about the now and the later. So they kind of want both to exist.
Yeah. Yes, it can. I chase and try to straddle that line myself, but it's a fine line. And so you really need to have somebody who's knowledgeable of both and can support you with both. But I can tell you, ultimately, as you get further and further in midlife, longevity focus needs to take over. When I
Mhm.
was in college and playing football, I used to bench press 385 pounds. And,
Wow.
we were constantly going for records, for squats, for deadlifts, all those big movements. And, now, I want no parts of that heavy kind of weight because my joints don't want it. And that's what I meant by when I say your joints start to have their own opinions of things. And so if you try to stay on that fitness thing too long, you're going to end up jacking yourself, in the long term. But yeah, I want to look capable. I want to have a nice little thin waist.
Mhm.
But I also want to be capable, which means I want to be able to, consistently stay independent and live healthy in my 80s and 90s.
Mhm.
That's
Absolutely.
a great question. People, ideally we want to straddle them both, but it's very hard, very hard.
Absolutely. And are there certain mistakes that you tend to see kind of over and over again in people that are over 40?
Yeah, just what we were talking about. Too much intensity, not enough structure, right? They got all gas and no plan, and they train randomly, which actually kind of isn't the proper way to do it. And so your body does love intensity, but it prefers progression and consistency over that intensity. You know, um, I see people out here copying workouts for people made for 25-year-olds. You know, and it's not, they shouldn't do them because they can't. They probably can, but the cost to benefit ratio is not worth it. So I saw a young lady on Instagram the other day showing a shoulder workout that I thought was for a middle linebacker. I mean, I'm looking at all these exercises going, oh my goodness, my shoulders were hurting just watching it. Now could someone in midlife do it? Yeah, but is that worth doing? No, no. So we should be focused more on workouts and training that has a high return on investment, right? Not that high return on ibuprofen. Okay. So, another mistake I often see is people, ignoring the whole mobility and strength balance, right? They're out here chasing sweat, which will, ultimately leave you kind of frail and cranky and tight. Whereas what you want really is a nice balance between mobility and strength in terms of your workouts, you know. And then probably the last mistake I see in midlife is people just not listening to their body, right? They're treating fatigue as weakness, instead of feedback. And like fatigue is it's not a character flaw, right? It's data. It's data. It's telling you that I need more recovery or something of that sort. And the balance between training, load, and recovery, that's the place where people need to spend most of their attention, because you got to balance those two. It's training and recovery. So the two have to be balanced. I see people just go, 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 go. And you're going to, especially if you're not eating for it, you're not resting for it, recovering for it, you're not going to make it to the end. And at this age, that's our goal, right?
Right. And, if someone strips it all down, what really matters most?
Mm, mm. Um, in midlife, strength, right? Muscle is insurance for aging,
Mhm.
right? It's your metabolism. It's going to protect your joints, your posture, your blood pressure, your blood sugar control, and your independence. So resistance training is associated with a lower mortality risk. There's not any guidelines out there that doesn't say strength training at least 2 times a week, because it has great, great, great outcomes for longevity. All right. It's number one. All right. You
Mm.
probably follow that up with mobility, because, if you move your joints, they stay young, and mobility keeps you pain free and efficient. And it allows you to use that strength that you actually have. All right. And then recovery is very important too. The sleep, the stress management, the nervous system regulation, those are just as important, because if if you're not recovering properly, everything's more difficult, right?
Mhm.
Fat loss is more difficult, building muscles more difficult, you got more cravings, your moods are off. Everything is harder, even consistency. So recovery plays an important part. And then the fourth thing I would say is obviously VO2 max, right? That's your maximum output for your cardiovascular system can produce while you're exercising. And that's huge because the number one killer is heart disease, right? And this shows your heart and lung and your circulatory like capacity.
Mhm.
And the higher your VO2 is, you're less the risk of chronic disease. We're talking heart disease, we're talking diabetes, we're talking all those things. So the answer kind of lies at the intersection of strength, mobility, recovery, and VO2 max, or your cardiovascular capacity. Those are the big four,
Mhm.
when you talk about things that matter.
So, in midlife, how does nutrition shift when longevity becomes the goal?
Well, the key is that we're now eating for energy, not restriction. So everyone is on these chronic dieting kind of nutrition plans, and that's not what you want when you're eating for longevity, right? It becomes fueling ourselves so that we can function. And so really blood sugar stability kind of becomes king, and that caloric obsession gets kicked to the side. Because when your blood sugar's balanced, your energy's good, your mood's good, your cravings good, and your recovery, all of them improve. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that protein matters a lot more than people realize. And someone I know has been saying this for 20 years. All right. But now the message is getting out there, and to preserve your muscle as you age, you need a much higher protein requirement than the bare minimum RDA recommendations, especially if you're going to pair it with strength training. So you need much more protein in your diet, pretty much every meal. Try to focus on at least 25 grams per meal. Some people say you need to eat as many grams as you weigh. I think that's a little high, but as long as you're getting at least, 25 to 30 grams in each meal, you're putting yourself in the right direction, and that's going to help balance that blood sugar.
Mhm.
And trying to train under fuel is like trying to build a house without electricity or during a power outage, right? There's just not enough fuel to do it. And so even if you're working hard and training, you're not going to get the results if you don't have that proper nutrition. So the key is making sure that there's minimal restriction and that you're fueling your body and balancing your blood sugar. That's protein, carbs, and fat in every meal.
And speaking about protein matters, and you said 25 grams, I have heard that too. You need a certain amount of protein or grams to your body weight or some equation like that. But
Yeah, sure, sure.
with 25 grams, like how does someone know what 25 grams of protein is? Or is it just the scales that you see in all these videos and people weighing out their food?
Yeah, yeah. So 1 ounce of protein, any protein, anything that swims, walks, or flies and has a face. So we're talking, chicken, we're talking cows, we're talking any of those things.
Hmm.
1 ounce is 7 grams of protein.
Okay.
Okay. So if you were trying to make sure you got at least 25 grams, that means when you're going to have lunch, you're going to have 4 ounces of protein. Now myself, 4 ounces is not enough. I'm
Right.
a 6 to 8 ounce person,
Mhm.
but so now the question becomes, what is 1 ounce?
Mhm.
Well, people are going to have to weigh that one out. So that's where the scales come in, and I'm a big fan of scales, and not that you need to weigh every single thing that you put in your mouth. I'm not the bodybuilding training days are over, but you need to know, what does 4 ounces look like?
Yeah.
And they, used to have the palm of your hand type thing, but,
Right.
but you need to know what it looks like, you know. And then there's the supplements, the protein powders and that sort of thing. Those are all labeled on the back, but a good quality scoop of some quality protein will have about 25 grams of protein in it, but it's something that people really need to take the time and kind of educate themselves on.
Mhm.
The food guide pyramid has just changed. All those guidelines have changed. Protein now has been bumped up to the top. And so things are starting to move in the right direction so that people are educated on this. But you need to kind of make the effort yourself to really learn. I know with my clients, I that's one of the first things I've stressed, like I said, for the past 20 years.
Mhm. It's interesting to hear that the food pyramids changed recently. I didn't know that, but I know I hear protein, protein, protein all over all the time.
All all over. And the thing about the whole food guide pyramid changing is, I mean, it's a big deal in terms of money and
Mhm.
how we educate our young people in schools and that sort of thing, because that's when we learned about the food guide pyramid. I can tell you nobody was following it anyway. We want. So for people in midlife and later on in life, we've already moved past that, and everyone kind of developed their own kind of like eating habits, but protein now is getting the due that it deserves. But I
Mhm.
must say, and please listen to this, continue to eat carbs.
Mhm.
All right, continue to eat carbs. People are just gorging themselves with protein and they're skipping the carbs, and it just doesn't make sense. And if you want your protein to work properly in your body to preserve your muscle and to be used for muscle building, well, then you need the carbs to give you the energy to do so.
Mhm. Absolutely. I know that's kind of the well-balanced meal is a little bit of carbs, a vegetable, some fiber, and the protein.
And the
That's
protein.
Mhm.
And the protein. But now the protein just got moved first.
Right, that's the most important part.
Right, 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 right.
And in midlife, beyond your diet and your nutrition being super important and maybe having to change a little bit and along and we've talked about this in previous episodes too about stress being
Mm.
something that also changes or potentially can increase in midlife. Why is stress management a non-negotiable in midlife? Why is that so crucial?
I love this question. And I love talking about stress and health,
Mhm.
because the two definitely play a part with each other. But stress affects everything: sleep quality, recovery, appetite, and consistency. Right. And there's long standing body of research out there that stress is linked to obesity. Okay.
Mhm.
Which is why I made it part of my perfect scale program. Okay. You have to manage your stress in order to get everything else in line. All right. And when your sleep is disrupted, training takes a hit. Your fueling takes a hit. Results are slower. It screws up your hunger hormones. So it's just something that needs to be addressed. And at midlife, stress isn't just work, right? It's family, it's finances, it's teenagers, it's caregiving for adults, it's schedules, it's hormones. So there's a lot of stress that comes with midlife. And you always hear people say you can't outtrain a bad diet.
Mhm.
Well, you can't outtrain a nervous system that never turns off,
Mhm.
you know?
Absolutely.
And so the only way to do that is to manage that stress.
Mhm. I love that. You can't outtrain a nervous system that never turns off.
Mm-mm,
True.
mm-mm. You can try, but you're just going to drive yourself further and further, into under recovery or burnout.
Mhm. We've touched on this previously, and it's funny because
Mhm.
I was talking to a friend recently, and she was, she's older, I would say, like, maybe early 40s or so, and she was
Mhm.
just showing me, "Oh, look at these pictures. I wanna get back to this," and, and I think I directly quoted you in this moment.
Nice,
I said
nice.
something along the lines of, like, "You can't compare yourself to who you were, 20 years ago. You just have to be the best version of yourself now. You still look
Yeah, it's
great.
a different game. It's a different game.
You're 41, 42. You're not gonna look exactly how you looked when you were in college." But it's
No,
for people. I'm sure for men too, but
sure,
even
sure.
probably even more so for women. So, you know, and it's this part's emotional for so many people, but how do you help clients let go of their younger body expectations?
Mm, that's a great question. And we've all been through it, including myself, right? And so the first thing you got to do is kind of normalize it, right? There's a real emotional component to that,
Uh-huh.
right? And you're not just changing workouts, but you're letting go of some old benchmarks, right? How my skin looked, how much I lifted, what I could do. And for some people, that's grief in a small form, you
Mhm.
know? And so you got to normalize that and you got to have a conversation about that. And then you got to shift the identity because what you want to do at midlife is go from performer, right, to protector, right? It's not look at what I can do anymore. It's about I'm building a body that's going to carry me through to the future. So now we're a protector of our health versus trying to use it to perform, right? And what you want to do is you just want to focus on consistency over intensity. You want to focus on mobility and strength over cardiovascular exercise. And you want to look at recovery as like a skill, not a luxury.
Mhm.
Okay. Because midlife strength, it's not about proving something, right? It's all about preserving where we are, and you just have to go through that process. First, we normalize it, then we get a new identity, and boom, here we are, the protector. Let's go out and make sure we can do the things that we want to do 20 years from now, or the things we're doing today 20 years from now. And that's what it becomes all about. The game just changes, and you got
Mhm.
to change with it, or, or,
Absolutely.
or you're going to die trying, and that's not going to be a good one.
Right, right. And with longevity and speaking about all these changes and even someone who may have been active when they were younger or maybe not active, either way, when the game is now about longevity, things have to change, right? Like you said. So, what does a longevity focus week actually look like?
It's kind of boring, which is good because boring is repeatable, right?
Mhm.
And what's repeatable kind of gets done.
Mhm.
But you know me, I'm all about customization for people and exercise and training, and everybody's different. But like a simple week would look like 2 to 3 strength training workouts. They could be full body or they could be, upper lower body splits. I'm a full body person, but I do them both. I mix them up as I go through the year. Low intensity movements. This is that zone 2 cardio, right? Here we're talking about incline walking, maybe an easy jog, some bike riding, not just your regular walking, right? We're a level above that. And that you probably want to do 3 to 4 times a week. Mobility work, 10 minutes of mobility work every day. Every day. And that for me, I start with my neck to make sure. If you look at a lot of people as they age or seniors, they can't turn around. They turn their whole body just to look over their shoulder.
I never.
So, and we're all hunched over, so I start with my neck, excuse me, shoulders, spine, hips, ankles. Right. So you want to make sure that your mobility is good and you're keeping that going. And that can be done 10 minutes a day. And then you want 1 to 2 planned recovery sessions. I do at least 2. And those recovery sessions, that's when you want to get your walking in. That slow walking that everybody's doing that they claim is exercise, which really isn't. That's when you want to do that. That's a recovery day. And you probably want to mix things in there like red light therapy. I do red light therapy, massage. You could do compression. You can do the saunas, but you want 1 to 2 days of just recovery, downshift, right? And then you want, depending upon the recovery, because make sure you're recovered. If you're doing a nice job with recovery, then you want 1 to 2 days of cardiovascular conditioning. And this is when we're doing that VO2 max work. And we're really, really, really pushing it and getting that heart rate up. Right. So you want to do that 1 to 2 days a week also. And then the last thing I would add to that, if you're a senior,
Mhm.
you need to work your balance. You need to do some balance work consistently, because you don't want any falls. And at the same time, we don't want any injuries. But that's kind of what the longevity piece looks like. It's boring, but it works. It's
Mhm.
boring, but it works.
And the way you break it down, it also makes it seem so simple in a way. If you just, even like, for example, this, I feel like my neck was so tight, and it's interesting because posted another podcast earlier this week,
Mhm.
Dr. Seema, and he was talking about uh, exercises and people's form and how they don't pay attention to their neck, and their neck will be out and they'll be doing
Oh,
exercises, but it didn't even click that you should actually just include your neck in your mobility. People just don't even think about this part,
no,
thinking about neck down, and it's true.
not
You
at
see
all.
this and a lot of this in older people.
And he was right, because if you look at people in the gym, most of the time when you're looking at their form, their neck is usually out of alignment.
That's exactly what he said. He was like, "You'll
It's
see."
usually out of alignment. He's absolutely right. Absolutely right. It's kind of forgotten about.
And if it's funny because when you did that, it kind of took me back to like elementary school gym class when you would just kind of do this, and the, the basic things you're taught of as a kid, and you forget about it over time. So it's almost like bringing it back to basics too, like getting back in
Mhm.
the simple things you used to do when you were younger in that way, but just bring them back in a new light as you get older, almost.
Absolutely. And you can do it 10 minutes a day. It's just a quick little 10-minute routine. Boom, you're gone.
Yeah.
You're off and you're running and you
hmm
feel good.
Yeah. Some of it you could even do, watching TV or whatever it is. If it's some mobility while you're sitting down or laying down, you could just kind of include these things at
Nah,
some.
get your ass up and do it. Don't watch the TV. You can, don't do it when you're watching TV. Focus on your body and get 10 quick minutes in and then go
Yeah,
get
you do
the TV.
that too. Do that. But like, if I feel like I'm gonna be like sitting down one day and just start doing this or this.
That's it. And that's good. And I love that. And then based off of that, I love that. And standing up.
Yeah.
Standing up, get a little quick little stretch, little bend, little
Yeah.
heel rocks,
Yeah.
boom,
Just
boom.
scared me
Okay,
when I
cool.
realized how tight my neck was. Like, wait a second. Whoa. It's early. I haven't moved much today. I'm gonna think about it
See?
that way.
There you go. There you go. Which is why I like to do it first thing in the morning.
Mm,
Because when I get up from sleep, sometimes I am stiff.
mm,
And sometimes it's something different than what was stiff the previous day. You
yeah.
know? So boom, I just hit it, do the quick routine, feel good, off and running.
hmm Absolutely. And what would you say to someone listening right now, or even one of your clients who maybe thinks they waited too long?
It's never too late. It's
Mhm.
never too late. I mean, and that's the way the body works. That's the beauty of it, right? Because I mean, the best time to do this was 20 years ago. Well, you can't change that. The second best time to do it, right now, right now. And so you're not behind. It's just the start of a new chapter, right? And the beauty of that is if you stack the right things, meaning strength training a couple days a week, higher protein intake, managing the stress, getting the sleep, right? Moving more, then that's going to compound like interest and you're going to improve significantly over a shorter period of time than somebody who's actually been doing it all along. Okay. So that's how bad the body wants to be healthy. So if it's never too late. You see these examples on the internet all the time. These people 70, 80 years old, just flipping the switch, and what they're doing, they're not going crazy, right? They're getting smart programming. It's got steady built-in progression and recovery and fueling. That's all they're doing. And so you can make the change immediately. It's never too late. Never, never, never.
Absolutely. Like you said, the best time might have been 20 years ago, but there's also no better time than to start now. You can't.
Present.
So do it today. Like you said, start moving. Absolutely. And, I think that talking about midlife and how it's never too late, midlife doesn't mean you're declining at all. It means clarity. So when you stop hustling your body and start leading it, everything changes. So to everyone listening, if this episode shifted how you think about training, share it with someone who's still trying to grind their way through health. And this is Midlife Unleashed, where we stop chasing quick wins and we start building bodies that last. I know I'm about to get up and go to the gym after this. I feel motivated and like I need to do some stretches and some strength training now. But thank you so much for this, Doug. I feel inspired by this episode. Sure.
Great. Let's get at it. Now's the best time.
Absolutely. So thank you again, Doug. This is Midlife Unleashed, and we will see you next time.